I'm an 18-year-old detransitioned woman from Central Valley, California, and I transitioned as a minor starting at 12 with social transition, and then at 13 I went on testosterone and puberty blockers, and at 15, when I was a sophomore in high school, I underwent a double mastectomy, and I stopped transitioning at 16.
And you've been very courageously sharing that story ever since. I really appreciate that. I kind of want to back up because I think a lot of people hear the stories of people who are transitioning kind of as they're in the thick of it. But back us up to when you got a gender dysphoria diagnosis, when you were 9, is that right? 8, 9 years old?
No, I was 12.
12. Okay, you're 12. So tell us about that that gender dysphoria diagnosis.
I started feeling like I wasn't actually a girl around the age of 11 or 12. I want to let my family know, and I want to actually go down this route of treatment. And I knew that I would have to get my parents involved, so they sent me to a therapist. They wanted to get professional help. And I guess their expectation would be that they would find out where these feelings would come from, and then they would just wait and see what would happen until I was I'd say at least 18, and that's what they wanted. They didn't want me to transition medically at such a young age. They wanted to leave it to me when I would be a legal adult. But that's not what happened. I mean, as soon as I walked in that appointment, I was called by my preferred name, and yeah, they...
Not even questioned?
No, not really. I mean, eventually I was given like a questionnaire for my gender dysphoria diagnosis, but it wasn't very thorough. And I don't really think now that the diagnosis was inaccurate necessarily, but I definitely went down the wrong course of treatment.
And that's a very real thing, and I think that's something that it's important that we talk about is that gender dysphoria is a real thing, and people do need real compassionate help. And I think it's important that we talk about that. Was the idea of all the medical interventions already in your mind when you walked into that therapist's office, or was that something that kind of grew over time there?
Yeah, I mean, it already was. Like, I knew, like, from the information that I gathered online, the research I did on it, it was presented as the only means of treating gender dysphoria. And it was treated the same way by the doctors.
Wow.
They didn't give us any other option.
Wow. So as you're in this therapist's office, then I assume they just kept pushing you toward that route. That was...
Not necessarily pushing me, but I was the one pushing for the treatment because I believed that it was the only way forward.
Yeah.
And it was patient-led, which I can't really think of any other course of treatment.
No.
Especially like in terms of like mental health.
Yeah, especially and all the more so with a minor when you're 11, 12, 13 years old, and you add that layer onto it. It's really unbelievable.
I couldn't smoke. I couldn't buy alcohol.
No.
Or a pack of cigarettes or marijuana, or get a tattoo, or drive a car. Then,
but I
could
pursue this transition.
Make a choice that would permanently affect my health. Right?
Wow. So talk us through then, once you actually started going through the interventions, just what that was like. I don't know that everyone understands what that course of treatment or interventions is.
Yeah, so after I was diagnosed, I started pushing my parents more and more to getting me on these treatments. And they pushed back because they didn't want me to. They, rightfully so, they thought that I wasn't mature enough to make that kind of decision yet. And they didn't want that responsibility on their hands either. They wanted it to be my choice when I would be old enough to make it. But they started talking about this with either the gender specialist or the therapist. And again, they weren't given any other option. They were fed lies, actually. They weren't they were told about the high desistance rate amongst children who present with gender dysphoria. And they were just told, like, well, children already know what they are from a very young age. And the regret rate is less than 1 or 2%. But if you don't allow her to transition, then she'll be even more regretful. And she may commit suicide. So they gave them the ultimatum of, would you rather have a dead daughter or a live son? I had a teacher, several teachers actually, over the course of a few years, told my parents, like, hey, I think your kid is autistic. And they told them to get me screening.
Wow.
But when they tried to screen me, it was just this young, inexperienced doctor. And she was like, nope, she's not autistic. She's pretty verbally and socially developed for her age. She's too smart. Like there's no way.
Wow, as if those things can't coexist.
And the funny thing is most high functioning autistic people are generally smarter than
very smart. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. They were willing to diagnose me with ADHD though, and disruptive behavior disorder, whatever that means.
Wow.
And then they started medicating me at 10. But
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, and I think I'm glad that you're talking about that, because that is so common that children who have gender dysphoria also have other often behavioral things or other mental health things going on as well.
Yeah.
And so often that's shoved under the rug because we're so focused on the gender dysphoria.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So I was referred to an endocrinologist a few months afterward. And the first one I saw said, I am not putting you on these treatments. Like, you're really young, and I don't know what this can do to your brain development. But I didn't hear that from any other doctor.
Wow.
The second...
No other doctor. No one else. Wow.
I never heard those concerns ever again.
Wow. And I mean, you probably went through a lot of people in that process too, who could have had the opportunity to speak into that.
Well, I only saw 2 endocrinologists.
Okay. Wow.
That's more than enough.
Yeah. Wow. Wow, that's unbelievable.
When I initially woke up from the surgery, once all like the meds were off and like I was fully conscious and I knew what was happening, I was happy. Like I was really glad that this was over and that I got through what I saw as this huge milestone. And I was looking forward to finally being all healed up and being able to go out shirtless and swim shirtless and just not to wear this uncomfortable thing around me.
Have an initial euphoria, like I feel like.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It started to go away pretty soon after though, because for the sake of the healing process and the incisions and stitches, I couldn't shower or bathe for about a week. But after a few days, I had to return to the hospital and had my stitches taken out. And that was one of the first things that woke me up to the reality of this. I couldn't really describe the sensation. I mean, it was numb, but at the same time, I could feel everything. It was painless, but it was really unnatural.
It's like something was missing.
Yeah. I mean, they had to like sever some nerve endings and doing a mastectomy, obviously. But the way they did it was I had to get the most common incision type, which means it's called double mastectomy with nipple grafts, meaning that they cut into the breast and they take out the tissue, and then they scrape out an area of skin on the chest. and they like excise around the areolas, and they basically take them out and just put them into that area of scraped skin.
Wow.
It's pretty barbaric.
Yeah.
But
wow. And you were 16?
Yeah, I was 15 actually.
15.
Yeah.
I just want to pause on that because you've gone through all of this already. I mean, set aside everything you've been through physically, just emotionally. You've described for us everything you've been through up to this point. Then on top of that, you've had puberty stopped. You're on testosterone, and you've gone through this surgery that you said. I mean, it is barbaric.
Yeah.
All by the time you're 15 years old.
Yeah.
Wow.
15 going on 16. But just looking down and like seeing what was happening, but also just not feeling like everything was in place. It actually made me physically sick. Like I had to stop a few times during the procedure. And after that, when I went home, that was when I started having to bathe again, like take care of like all the incisions and do the wound aftercare. And it was hard to look down at my chest like that. I mean, there are these just big wounds stretched across my chest.
Wow.
And I would have to look at that every night and just do it all on my own. And shortly after this was when I started realizing that there were a lot of things that I missed about being a girl. I missed feeling more connected to my friends and family. I missed being able to express myself more, especially emotionally.
Yeah.
And having my relationships just weren't as close or satisfying anymore. And there are a lot of things that I felt like I couldn't talk about.
And I'm sure that was a combination of everything you've been through, but then also I know that being on testosterone can actually change your chemical makeup. I mean, it literally changed chemical makeup, but it's
play a role in pretty much every function, every area of the body.
Yeah. So I'm sure that had to contribute.
Yeah, it made it harder to cry, and it also made crying less rewarding, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Wow.
So sometimes I would like cry for hours on end, and I just wouldn't feel anything other than empty. But I missed being pretty. I missed having long hair. I missed being able to play with makeup and wear cute clothes. But by this point in time, I was nearly 3 years on testosterone.
Yeah.
And I didn't look like a girl. I didn't sound like a girl. And everybody knew me as a boy. So I couldn't really couldn't do that, obviously, without what's the word? Not like backlash, but I would get a lot of crap for it, especially from my friends. It wouldn't look right.
What was the point at which detransition even started to cross your mind?
This was during COVID, so I had the comfort. I saw it as a comfort at the time of being able to just be at home, or like when I would go to school, just like wear a mask and like cover up my face because I hated my face. I hated how I looked. And I was really ashamed of this, but in private, at home, I would just like wear my old girl clothes, and sometimes I would like buy makeup from the drugstore and put it on. But I wouldn't let anybody see that as much as I wanted to. It wasn't until in my junior year when I was taking a psychology class that I was like, I can't do this anymore. And the trigger for me was towards the end of the unit, there were lessons on like parenting, child development, and just stuff of that sort. And it was the first time, like, I really thought, like, I might want to have a family one day. And I'm on these treatments that might disrupt that. And I won't ever know what it's like to breastfeed a child. And that was really what woke me up. Because I just couldn't take it anymore. I felt awful. I felt like even if I would be able to conceive a child, like I just took something from them and from myself.
Yeah. Was there anyone before that moment, you know, as you were talking with endocrinologists, as you were talking with surgeons, was there anyone who mentioned that aspect of it, who said, you might not be able to have children, or just a reminder, if we do a double mastectomy, you won't be able to breastfeed?
Yeah, I mean, endocrinologists did tell me that this could affect my ability to have kids.
And probably
I wasn't thinking about that. I was a kid.
Yes.
And I didn't know, obviously, that I would lose my ability to breastfeed after they like severed the stalk of the nipple and removed my breast tissue. But I was in the mindset of actually being a male, and I don't think any man thinks about breastfeeding children, right?
No, and you were 13, 14, 15 as all of this is going on.
Yep.
And that's just not something the normal 15-year-old is sitting around thinking about. Boy, I can't wait to breastfeed my children. That's just because you're 15. And yet here are these doctors.
Oh yeah, sure. It's
saying it's okay. It's totally okay. She knows what she wants. Wow. So you finally decide you're starting to kind of casually detransition at home. What was the point at which you finally said, I'm going to be more open about this? And then what was the point at which you started speaking out and sharing your story?
I was starting to become more open with presenting myself femininely. But there was one night when I just broke down crying. I was really upset, and that was when it really started to set in the reality of the situation. And I couldn't face my parents like that. I called a friend of mine. I called and texted my mom about it, but I didn't want my mom or dad to see me like that. I didn't want them to see their own daughter with her tears just streaming down her face like that. And I knew they would feel guilty. This was something that they had to sign off on, and it was on the pretense that it would help me and that I knew what I was getting into. But I didn't, and it didn't help at all. And I didn't want to put that on them. And for the next few weeks after that, it was just I didn't really know what to do with myself. And at this point in time, I mean, COVID basically destroyed all my relationships at school, so I wasn't really talking with anybody from school. But I was in a few communities online, including a lot of them involved a lot of other transgender people. But when I talked about my regret and how I hated how it made me look and feel, and how I just felt used by my doctors, I got a lot of crap from other transgender people.
Wow.
And sometimes people who call themselves allies but had no experience with transitioning at all. I was called a TERF. I was called a transphobe. I was told I wasn't ever a real transgender person, and I just took resources from the people who needed it, and that I shouldn't be talking about this.
Which is just incredible, coming from a movement that is okay with people changing in one direction.
Yep.
So affirming, so excited for people to change in one direction. But if they decide, no, they're going to change back in the other direction, suddenly that's how you're treated.
At first I just used it for personal purposes. I didn't really take it that seriously, but I realized like I could use this as a platform to talk about my experience. And I just, that's where it all started.
And that's what you've done.
Yeah.
And now you've been sharing your story all over the place. We were talking before you came in here about just how crazy it's been, because you've been traveling all over the place telling this story. It's something I noticed as I was thinking about talking with you is that, so you started your transition in 2017, and that I just think this is a cool parallel. So in 2017 was the first year that Family Policy Alliance actually drafted legislation to protect kids from these transition procedures. So we drafted that at the same time as you're starting this. 2021 is when you start detransitioning, right? And that's the first year that one of these actually passes. And it's
What
like,
month?
It was in April, I think.
That was
March or April.
That was a month before I stopped transitioning.
Wow. Just those timelines. I just think that's incredible. It's like your story is kind of this parallel with what was going on in the broader culture, because it was, it makes perfect sense that it's around that time that you're also you're starting to detransition, because I think that's when things were really starting to get rolling within that movement. This is right after we had the Obergefell decision, right after Caitlyn Jenner, right after Jazz Jennings. All of that had just happened in the last couple of years. So it was kind of this peak moment. You start transitioning. We introduced legislation a few years later. Now the first law actually passes. You start detransitioning.
Yeah. The funny thing is, I didn't have any exposure to that. I didn't know that any of that was happening.
Wow.
And I was in California in the middle of all this, so I was just blissfully unaware. But I don't know if that's really bliss, honestly.
Well, right, right. But I think that's actually interesting that you had no idea that this broader cultural thing is going on. You're just sort of at that point, it's trickled all the way down to a 12, 13-year-old girl. Like that's how far it had gotten. But now here we are, 2021, this first law passes. When did you become aware of the kind of the legal and political efforts to protect kids like yourself?
I never really paid any mind to it, and I don't know how widespread it was until I started speaking out, actually. After I had reporters reaching out to me and reporting on my story. Eventually, I had people reaching out, like, hey, would you mind coming out and testify on this bill?
And you have done that, and you've been testifying all over the place. Yeah, I know we were talking about this. We've been involved in lots of that legislation, and I'm hearing from state folks that you're doing a wonderful job sharing your story, speaking out very courageously. What is that experience like when you go there and you testify? I don't think a lot of people can relate to that experience at all. So what has that been like?
The first few times it was kind of nerve-wracking. I didn't get to actually testify in a hearing the first time. And that was a little disappointing. But I went to a private conference room and got to speak to legislators. And that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, and I know that so many people, whether it's the lawmakers who are working on this or other detransitioners who haven't spoken out or don't feel like they're in a position to do that, are so grateful for you doing that. I'm grateful for you doing that. I'd love for you to maybe share a word of encouragement back. So there's lawmakers, as you know, you've probably seen. I mean, they're getting heckled. I'm sure you've experienced some of that. You mentioned the articles saying these transphobes are doing these terrible things to kids.
And now I'm in those articles.
And now
I am the transphobe.
Now you are in those articles, yes. And we host a Family Policy Alliance, so we host a network of 40 state groups, and many of them are the ones that are working on this legislation. What encouragement do you have for them or for the people who are supporting them and cheering them on as they're working on this legislation?
I mean, I know a lot of people from all sorts of backgrounds who very strongly oppose this, but they're scared to speak out because of social stigma, especially those in younger generations, or out of fear of losing their jobs.
Yeah.
But I really don't think that there's any excuse not to speak out on this.
Yeah.
Real friends will stick with you, and you can always freshen up your resume. I mean, I guess it's kind of easy for me to say, but it's our kids that are on the line. And they need everybody around them to advocate for them. It's this attitude of, oh, I can't speak out on this. I don't feel qualified to speak out on this. Or, well, it's just so ridiculous. Like, there's no way this is going to affect me or my family or my community that has allowed this to fester for so long. And we can't let it any longer.